Welcome into another video production of What the Grit. First and foremost, we want to always state that our business is focused on assisting our community plant the seeds of prosperity, feed the soil of freedom, and nurture the tree of life. This episode will focus on current struggle people are facing in the job market and solutions for you all to use during these difficult times. My name is Paul Anderson. I'm a learner, leader, writer, and speaker, and a military veteran. My mission in life is to produce something necessary and beautiful that contributes to the betterment of humanity. Without further ado, I want to welcome in our guest here, Christopher Lee. He's a military veteran and business operations leader. Could you introduce yourself a little bit more, Chris?
Yep. Hello, Paul, and everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Chris Lee. As Paul said, right, I've been in operations for the last 10 years in a variety of industries. And prior to that, I did 8 years as a infantry officer, in the Army.
And today I wanted to lead with a quote. I like to lead these podcasts with a quote for us all to think about as we go through our discussion. This one is a Japanese proverb. It says, "You cannot cross the ocean unless you are willing to lose sight of the shore." And so that should give us a way to challenge our fear, knowing that we can leave this boundary that we give ourselves. I want the words in our discussion to act as a catalyst in your guys' quest for the obtainment of wisdom. Chris and I cannot give you wisdom, only knowledge. Without wisdom obtained through life experience, we cannot see the error in our ways and grow from them. There's a lot I wish to do for the people of the world, and over the past 10 years, I have come to believe that the only mission worth living is to improve as many individual lives as possible. A little bit of change everywhere can cause everything to change for the better everywhere. And with that, I want us to bring a little bit of that positive change by allowing Chris and I to show you how having a growth mindset will give you a higher grit level. First, Chris, I wanted to ask you, what do you think about the idea that sometimes we just need to add a little bit of responsibility to inspire the change we need in ourselves?
Well, I think everyone can take responsibility, right? But not everyone does. When we're talking about taking responsibility, I think you have to understand that you are in control of what you ultimately decide to do, right? You may be given forks in the road to make a decision to go left or to go right or to go straight, but you take that responsibility for the decision you make and you have to own it. There's a lot of what I would consider victimizations out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you are outside, everything is against you and you have no control of what happens. Well, you do. Or the best thing I would say is you have to shape that environment to allow you to have it in control, right? Not in control like an iron fist type of thing, right? But just control your life, control the setting so that you can have consistency in what you're trying to achieve. Otherwise, you are going to get pulled in multiple directions. Something like that could be, routines, systems, support networks, mapping out what you want to do before you start doing it. If you do things like that, then you ultimately feel more responsible because you are literally helping develop what you want to do and seeing yourself achieve it.
Yeah, on that note, I had kind of responsibility. So I'll write out my goals for the next 3 months, and then I'll tell my battle buddy, hey, these are my goals. And then I will set up little milestones. Okay, so by this date, I should have done this.
Mhm.
And by getting those nudges, having an alarm clock that goes off. I know you have probably a lot of alarms that go off, and it tells me, hey, you need to spend 10 minutes doing this thing. And then at the end of the day, and I'll get into later with you, is that I grade myself on how I'm doing toward my goals every day. Not that how maybe my day went, but have I made progress toward the goals that I'm trying to achieve? I really thought your background was really interesting, and even more interesting, your transition from the military to civilian. I think a lot of our listeners could gain from how you have handled your hardships. Especially prevalent now are a lot of listeners out there who have been laid off. We've been seeing those all over LinkedIn. I
Yep.
remember discussing your experience finding employment as you left the armed services. Could you talk a little bit about what happened and how you were able to be successful even though you faced a great hardship?
Well, yeah, I think one of the things I was surprised about when I got out of the military was that I got out for stabilization. But yet in operations, I think I've been laid off 3 times. And because businesses get bought out, positions get redlined or removed, or the industry just, there's not a demand, right? When those things happen, those things are way outside your control. But even in the military, right? I had a whole plan that when I was getting out, I was going to do FBI because I enjoyed that. I was an infantry guy. And I was 2/3 of the way through that process. And then all of a sudden, I get told right when I get back from my deployment, I already put in my get out of the army paperwork, that my last final interview got pushed back and delayed a month. Not an issue. Not, oh well. And then it got delayed 6 months. And I'm like, well, that's a little much. And then it got shut down because they went on a hiring freeze. So now I'm in a situation where, well, the only thing I wanted to do was to be in the FBI, be in the federal type of government, because both my parents are in federal government. That's what I kind of majored in and I enjoyed. When you're in that position, I'm like, well, what is everyone else who has infantry? Not an engineer or a logistics, officer. And the default was kind of operations, about leading individuals. I'm like, I've done that. I enjoy that. And I was able to work through a headhunter. I've done a couple of headhunters actually in between my layoffs and so on, because now this is not for everyone. Not everyone could have a headhunter, right? Because a lot of the headhunters, they target you because you have a certain set of skills that other businesses want. If you're ex-military or if you're trying to transition out, there are headhunters who will say, come join us. We'll give you in front of interviews or in front of companies that, at these conventions or whichever. And you may do like round robin and go to multiple interviews and hopefully you land one. That's what I did for my first job. But then after I got laid off of that because the company got bought out, I went through a civilian headhunter, where if you have a set of skills, whether you're military or not, but you just have experience, they're looking for different industries and they'll help you get there. So I think leveraging, knowing that it's not just you who has to find a role, or there's resources out there so that they can assist you, at least putting you in front of someone. That allowed me. Now, once you're in there, you got to sell yourself. You got to know how to communicate. You got to know how to present it, because ultimately you have the foundation, but now you got to sell yourself and you got to be able to communicate the wins that you've done and the stories that you have. And then lastly, during my last layoff, it was on LinkedIn. LinkedIn found me a job, went through a military transition from the current role I'm in. And I think I had a job within 2 weeks of my last layoff. So I was pretty happy with that, but it's just roll with it. You have to roll with the punches ultimately, right? But at the same time, it's a chance to ponder. You're at a fork, right? Or you may have multiple routes in front of you, multiple doors in front of you. Well, it's where do you want to go? And you have a decision. Do I want to continue to going down operations? Do I want to continue going down maybe a passion that I have? Or do I want to do an independent thing? It at least allows you to challenge yourself and say, yep, I want to continue down this path. Maybe this is an opportunity. When one door closes, another one opens. And just really have to really assess where do you want to go and what the best opportunity for you and your family and your situation.
Yeah, and I've used a few headhunter companies. Also, I've had hit or miss things with it, but one thing is that it does challenge you to get up in front of people, right, and start discussing your experiences and how to discuss those, because it's not easy. An interview, right, is way different than a job, and like the resume is to get the interview, and the interview is to get the job. And just because you interview doesn't mean that you're going to do well at the job.
Yes.
I've noticed that. And so really prepping for the interviews and understanding how to discuss your experience based on that job is important. But challenging yourself is the most important, because if you don't challenge yourself to get up in front of these, then you're just gonna stay the same, right?
Yeah, and I think it's all about the prep work, right? If you don't prep for anything or have the discipline to rehearse and know your stories and speak it, partner with a friend, do whichever you need. I've conducted hundreds of interviews, whether it's hiring supervisors or others, and there are plenty of candidates who we decline or do not accept, who were qualified, but because they could not communicate effectively on what they did and how they can be a benefit to the company or why they even choose this company, they're not going to be selected over someone who also is baseline qualified, who knows why they're there. They can clearly communicate what they want and how they've done it and things of that nature. But there's definitely a lot who just struggle to talk, and it's like, I can't answer it for you.
And I wanted to open a little bit of a discussion about an idea that I put in my book about a human motivation that I found. I kind of did this by accident as a child. I call it loss aversion. It's about implanting the idea that individual is wasting their potential when they do not act. Our leadership experiences, right, show that humanity's loss aversion can be taught to people. So the idea is, if I don't do this, then I can't have that. So like if I like my cup of coffee in the morning, I can't have it unless I start doing my physical therapy for my military injuries. If I don't do that, I can't have this. And I force that into myself in a lot of different ways. And you can get extreme with it in your head, and it can get kind of toxic if you're not careful. But I think that if we can put a loss aversion in our head about some stuff, then we will gain motivation in doing the things that we need to do. Do you feel that way too in some ways? Have you ever done that?
Yes, but so you can do that to inspire you and motivate you. And I think the other piece too is understanding really what are you even trying to do, right? What are you can give yourself rewards, right? If you do certain things, but if you also have that intrinsic piece where it's, I know why I'm doing this. I know why I'm here. And you don't lose sight of the end goal, because sometimes during the now, it may suck, right? You may be dealing with adversity or pain, but you know what you're dealing with is to get you to a end state, not the now. If you don't lose sight of that and you have the discipline to continue that grind as wherever it's needed, then that could also inspire you and motivate you to do things. But me personally, I've never had to, do 10 push-ups for a coffee or anything related to that. But I think that is a technique. And I think that goes back to shaping your environment. It's whatever you need to do. If you reached a barrier, or if you had a time where you're undisciplined, or a time where you may have cheated in something that you wanted to do. And if you need to set those barriers or those obstacles for yourself, so that that's your mechanism, that's your way to inspire change or inspire growth, then do what works for you, and don't let anyone stop you.
Yeah, and I really feel like this idea of necessity always comes up, right? And I feel like in order to have better discipline, we need to explain to ourselves why, just like the why, right? It is essential and necessary that you're doing what you are. If you can't explain it rationally, then you need to rethink what you're doing. Very difficult to do, and I think that people should really start with the simple things first. If you make all the simple things right, then you're gonna be successful, because that's where the bottom line is. And I really feel that as humans, we have a tendency to avoid loss. We should train ourselves to believe that we lose our potential if we're not acting to the best of our ability. And that's actually what I wanted to get into next. Have you ever heard of the idea of ocracia?
Well, I think you mentioned that it's the, what we often act against our better judgment.
And I'm wondering, do you think that personally? Do you think that people act against their better judgment?
I think people, when we say act against their better judgment, a lot of times when I hear that, it's you're already making an assessment that if you do this, the consequences could be bad, right? In these cases where it's a known, I know the consequence, or I know the potential consequence, there is the ability for people to fail, whether it's lust or greed or something like that, right? They know they shouldn't, but they may. But in terms of just poor decision making, right, which happens all the time, there's a lot of people who make just bad decisions. I don't know if they really understand the consequences of those actions. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't do it. Or they've been so complacent, meaning they've made a bad decision, there were no consequences to those actions, so then they do it again, there was no consequences to the actions, and now it's become norm. And it's not even they don't grapple that if they should be doing something or not. It's just normal for them now. And so if you look at it from that sense, I wouldn't follow that. I think it's more of those larger pieces. But that doesn't mean that people don't make poor decisions, because again, people make poor decisions every day that end up them in jail, DUI, you name it, and they continue to do that stuff.
Yeah, and I personally believe in growth and the mindset we have to have so much that I actually cannot adhere to the idea that we act against our better judgment. Rather, I believe that we have not been developed well enough to act better. So a good example of this was in the military. As an officer, we would always give those safety briefs during the weekend, right?
Yep.
And give it every week about no drinking and driving, no doing drugs, getting into bar fights, and not abusing people in their life. Still, people did this. Smart soldiers who knew better made these mistakes. It was always sad to see someone make a mistake like this. One soldier of mine did not wear a seatbelt, for example. No matter how many times he was reminded, he never would. The soldier had a master's degree in engineering, and he was 38. He had wisdom of age and proven intelligent at work. He was in a military intelligence unit. He was a geospatial engineer, so it took a lot of skill to do that. And why then do you think they didn't wear a seatbelt? I have no idea. It was not 3 days after he was told to do so. He was in a horrific car accident. He was in the left rear seat of a van when it crashed into a barrier during a Washington storm. He was transported to Madigan emergency room with multiple broken bones and lacerations, and he needed immediate surgery, 9 units of blood, a mechanical ventilator to help him breathe, and several more operations. He barely survived, but nobody would say that he was stupid. Yet there he was, an unrestrained passenger in a car accident at a time when every American knows that a seatbelt saves lives. This single story reflects a fundamental weakness in our approach to improving human behavior. Nearly everything we teach people is based on the idea of behave rationally. If you give me information, I will process information in my head and my behavior will change as a result. My soldier knew to wear a seatbelt, told me so. This is not a laughing matter, and we all make mistakes like this. And I think that's something we need to challenge each other to change. I think that as a society, we do not have a knowledge deficit, but instead we have a behavior deficit. It's not that we don't know better, right? We understand the consequences for the most part. The only way to change is to do something completely different. Problem, I think, is action. My soldier didn't do better, and we can. What makes it hard is the fact that the mind is a high resistance pathway. Changing a person's mind with information is very difficult. Changing their behavior with information is harder still. Therefore, the only way to make the required improvements that fulfill our potential is to focus our attention on our true motivations. Don't we all desire to be better people? I think we do. At least I try to hold that as like a positive in my head. We don't always do that. And I was wondering what you think about how we have a behavior deficit. How do we get people to get past this where we have this knowledge, but we're not acting better?
Well, I don't think that people are rational, if that makes sense. I think that there are some that can process information, make informed decisions, but I think the majority of people are just people in general, either don't have the time or they don't see the significance of it, right? Because it could be, hey, I'm living as I live. It's my choice. It could be a spiritual piece. There's so many different aspects why people may not make rational decisions, because what's rational is what I would do, right? In my head, what I think is what you should be doing, because it makes the most sense to do this. Well, if you always have that, you'll never get artists, right? And you'll never have people who think outside the box or think that against the norm. And so I think people inherently are designed to be irrational. And then sometimes you have some conformists, and sometimes you have people that make sense. Hey, I want to get a family. I want to do this. I want to get a 9-to-5 job or whichever. But the behavior piece is unique because you do have people who make poor decisions routinely. And so it's very hard to change that behavior. I think the biggest thing that I've noticed through being a manager and a leader for 20 years or so is that I call it almost like a maturity, right? The maturity level increases when the responsibility increases, from what I've noticed. It's not for everyone, right? There's still people who, it doesn't matter if they have kids and a family that depend on them, they're still going to make poor choices. But I feel that sometimes if you have a reason outside of yourself on what you're trying to do, whatever that is, whether it's for religion, whether it's for family, whether it's for a goal that you have and you're moving through some stuff, that kind of motivates you and keeps you grounded so that you choose to make a rational decision, right? I don't think people just default with rational decisions, that they have to consciously try to choose it and understand those consequences. And again, the biggest thing with a lot of that stuff is complacency, like in terms of the person with the seatbelt. If that person has done it 1,000 times and nothing happens, I'm telling you right now, they're not even thinking of it as a decision. So it's not even a rationalization. It's not even a decision. It's a habit now. And so it's very hard to change habits unless you choose to make a new habit and you consciously say, if this happens again, I'm going to do this instead, right? And so every time you face this situation, now instead of doing what you used to do, I'm going to be doing something different, because you're trying consciously breaking of that habit, or it's a routine that's been given to you by family members or intervention or from a work piece type of thing. So that again, when you hit your head against the wall because of a poor decision you made, hopefully it's not as catastrophic, right? I mean, severe injury, or it could be just a near miss to an extent that caused you to change that behavior, but there may have to be some type of intervention in that way so that you see it more than just a simple act.
Yeah, and I liked your idea idea about that we're not completely rational people, and behavioral economists have had this idea coined that emotions drive action and rationality drives reason, right? Or decision, right? So your actions, sometimes when we're making our actions, we need to take a step back and be objective. Like, am I acting on my emotions, right? And a good way to think about that is in emotional intelligence, we learn that there's only really 4 basic human emotions, and there's happiness, you can be afraid, you can be sad, you can be angry. Okay. By understanding those 4, you can, maybe it's a mix of the 4, right? And that's where we get the extra words. We can see why we're making the actions on a daily basis that we are. Maybe they become the habits that we do. You know, Chris, I've got this idea of pronoia that has really helped me throughout my career. I talked about a story in the last podcast where I duct taped my feet together because they were basically, the heel was falling off, and refused nurse care in order to pass LDAC, or Leadership Development Assessment course. It really helped me because I believed that my actions were going to basically, the world was going to conspire to help me achieve this goal that I've been working so hard all these years for, by acting toward that goal in such a way that was powerful, right? That other people would see it and other people would help me through no matter what. And I want to know, do you believe in the power of pronoia versus paranoia? And could you maybe tell us a story if you do?
So, I have my mom who always tells me, when things happen for a reason, right? And I think you have to look at it. You can look at it different ways, and I don't think there's a right or wrong way of looking at it. I don't think that the world is conspiring to be good for me. I think if you look at majority of the people, not, bad things happen, but that's just also life, right? And you have to accept it to an extent. But I do think that you cannot get down on whatever the world throws at you. If you look at it think of it like a dandelion, right? This seeds blow in the wind. I may want to go I'm at A and I want to go to point D, but then the wind blows and I'm holding on to this dandelion, and instead of going to D, it goes to Z. I'm like, whoa, well, why are we going in that direction? And then it lands. Well, wherever this dandelion lands, it grows. And that's how I feel like sometimes we have to be as a society, as a people, is we may have certain plans, but I'm telling you right now, if you asked me 10 years ago, 20 years ago, what I want to do and where I would have saw myself, I would have had no idea I would be in my current position. Right. So we may be in situations that we couldn't even concept or believe, even though we may have a short term, hey, this is what I want. I think the ability to adapt to whatever is thrown at us and find the good in it and find the opportunity and try to plant your seed so that you can grow and establish yourself. And did I dream of being an operations manager in operations? No. But guess what? I'm doing that, and I'm trying to do the best that I can and be successful at that for my family and so on. When I was in the military, hey, same thing. I want to be a good officer. I want to lead my people and everything else. But that doesn't mean life happens, right? I can get laid off again. And so that may not, but at the same time, if you look at it as in the moment, that sucked for me, right? However, it was actually better because I found a better job the next time, right? I found a better opportunity the following time. So you can take some negatives and find a positive spin or find a positive outcome, because all those things are just challenges. And eventually you're going to get to a goal. So even though it may suck for a 6-month period, a 3-month period, a year, you may get somewhere and you're like, well, if I didn't go through that challenge or that experience, I may actually not be currently where I am. Yeah, I guess that's my thoughts on that.
That makes a lot of sense. And we talked about a lot about this planning that never survives the line of departure, right? I'm wondering, for people out there, how do we approach the current difficulties in life when all of our plans fail? And specifically, what happens when we do follow our vision, but everyone we think is our support system do not believe in us, or maybe they're trying to protect us from it. And so they tell us, oh, that'd be too hard, shouldn't be doing that. And how have you been able to push through your most difficult moments without others believing in you?
Well, I think when you deal with any type of difficulty, whether it's life or your life plans, you got to be true to yourself and figure out what you want to do. Obviously, every individual's up to themselves, right? But to me, I still want to do what I get enjoyment out of, what I enjoy, whether it's, from a job, whether it's from a financial piece, whether it's from a passion piece. You still have to do what you want to do, even if you fail towards it, if it makes sense. Because plans fail, but know who you want to be. So when one door closes, are you going to completely change who you want to be in order to continue a different plan, or are you going to stay on that horse to an extent? I think you just have to be flexible and look at what you actually want to do. Stay true to yourself. But then at the same time, if you fail, you should always reflect on it. Or if you have people who say, that's not good, I would still reflect on some of the feedback, because regardless of how it may be presented, I would analyze the context of any type of feedback or any type of failure situation and figure out, how do I grow from that opportunity? Because if you don't reflect on what just happened, then you'll never grow as a person, or you'll be thinking everything I'm doing is perfect, and then you keep on moving forward and you're not really changing. Or if your mindset is, well, it's just them, they don't understand me, I made all the right decisions and they just either don't understand my artistic talent, my mentality, my whichever, then again, you may not be changing, right? If you looked at me as year one supervisor Chris compared to year 10 operations manager Chris, I'm a different person, right? You have to change your mentality, your behavior, your skills, and those type of things. For me, in terms of a support piece, I never really had family who were against me or anything, right? I feel like I've been with my wife since we've been in high school, so she's been kind of my rock. I think it's good to have a support network, and that's what's kind of helped me. I haven't really had a lack of support network. Now, if you look at, I have 3 kids across the country, and I had no support. It was just me and the wife, no family in the nearby. You still have to make do and make a plan to still be successful. And if you are failing, or if you have people who are too negative, you got to decide, is that helping or hurting you? Is their feedback allowing you to grow, or is that feedback allowing you to be put in the ground? And I think you need to make a decision on how you want to handle that type of feedback and those type of individuals. And if you need to cut them out of your life, or just put some earplugs in and not listen to them, then you have to make a decision. But ultimately, you have to reflect on feedback so you can get better, because we are not perfect. And if we think that we are doing everything perfect, then we're never going to grow, and we're going to be the same. We're going to be static.
Mm-hmm. Leads us into our final part here. I want to leave our listeners with something that they can do to improve their well-being. Something I do on a regular basis is I look at myself from a physical, social, community, professional, and financial well-being aspect. And then I grade myself on a 1 to 10 level in those areas, and I write down, what's going on. And so I would like everybody to go ahead and write those things down: physical well-being, your social well-being, community well-being, professional, and financial. And try to give your guys a score and write down exactly what's going on in your life as part of this, and then put goals and an action plan toward improvement that you should take precedence over the others. It's okay to have a low score. If you have a low financial well-being score, well, then this is a perfect opportunity to write down all those things that are causing that. Maybe too many Starbucks, right? But the idea is to get better each day and write down small ways you can improve each of them, and have that action plan. Even if that action plan isn't coming to fruition every day, don't be so hard on yourself, because we can't all be perfect every day, right? Just a quick question, Chris, do you ever write down this kind of thing about your different parts of your well-being and try to analyze yourself?
Not necessarily like this in that method, but I think if you do pick one and you're analyzing, you almost want to use almost like a vision, right? If you'll say you're saying physical well-being, what is your vision? Where do you see yourself? And then what are the barriers that's preventing you from being there? And then, like, not barriers in terms of like maybe physical barriers, but what mentally or routine wise is preventing you from doing that? Like, what's preventing me from doing 50 push-ups at the end of the night? Why am I not doing that in order to get in better physical condition? If I want to be in a better, what are those barriers? And then what behaviors do you need to change to overcome the barriers that are preventing you from getting that goal? You really have to kind of not just, state a goal, but kind of map it out. But if you don't even know where your end state is, or what does 10 look like, where, or at least an 8, or where you can be satisfied, where does it look like? How do you get there? And then map it out with the obstacles, and then challenge yourself to stay on track on it, right? Because then it's on you to kind of continue that bias direction. But if you don't have the map for it, it'll be hard to get there if you don't know where you're going.
Yeah. And yeah, the vision is the thing. I just released a video on a vision, and like my vision of myself is to create something necessary and beautiful for humanity, right? That contributes to everybody on a daily basis. And that's why I started my company, What the Grid, and why I did all the research to finalize the idea that having a growth mindset actually helps you have a stronger grit level. And that growth mindset, understanding that you're malleable, that you're changing, that you can change for the better or the worse based on your decisions every day. Thanks for coming on today. It was really great to hear your stories about the job market. And I know a lot of people are really working through a lot of stuff right now. But yeah, I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, Paul. Well, thank you for what you're doing. I know you have a big your vision's a big goal, right? Impacting the whole world and everything, right? But again, it's anything that people can do to better themselves or to find some type of direction or some guidance. Because again, some people just need some of the tools or methods so that they can get there. Because for some reason they're walking, but they're walking in the dark.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and I hope you have a good day.
Hi, Paul. Thank you.